Winston Churchill was famous for his witty quotes, and this is what Churchill had to say after the Second World War had ended. "The only thing that ever really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." Churchill said that with good reason. Nazi Germany's U-boat division was indeed a formidable force that the Allies had to contend with during World War II. This was especially true of the first few years of the war, a time during which Germany held the upper hand in what was known as the Battle of the Atlantic. And that was just as true of World War I, the Great War in which U-boats made their first appearance. The destruction those early U-boats wreaked on enemy ships was a game-changer in modern military history. U-boat commanders were among the most revered and respected officers in the German military in both world wars. In this video, we will explore the remarkable feats of one U-boat commander, Lothar von Arnauld de la Perière. Not only was he Germany's most successful U-boat commander, but he's considered the most successful submariner of all time. Lothar von Arnauld de la Perière's ancestry is quite interesting and worth noting. It also explains how a man with a decidedly French surname became an icon of the German Navy. It was in 1757 that his great-grandfather, Jean-Gabriel Arnauld, Lord of La Perière, a young lieutenant and nobleman in the French army, had to flee France. This was as a result of a duel with a prince of the ruling Bourbon royal family. He chose to flee to Prussia and what is today Eastern Germany and soon developed an excellent reputation in the Prussian army. Due to their French nobility, the Arnauld de la Perière family became part of Prussian nobility, with the name von added to denote their acquired Germanic nobility. And so it was that Lothar von Arnauld de la Perière was born on March 18, 1886, in what was then the Prussian town of Posen, and is today the city of Posen in Poland. Von Arnauld joined the German Imperial Naval Academy in 1904 at age 18. Having first served as a sea cadet in 1903. By the outbreak of the First World War in 1914, he'd been appointed lieutenant. He took command of his first U-boat, U-35, in 1915, a boat he commandeered for 3 years. Lothar's 2 younger brothers also joined the military. Friedrich, younger than Lothar by 2 years, would become General Lieutenant or Lieutenant General of the Luftwaffe or Air Force, while the youngest, Helmut, would be killed early in World War I at the Battle of Würden. The von Arnauld de la Perière brothers were typical of Prussian nobility, steeped in military tradition. But it was Lothar who would be by far the most famous. Lothar Arnauld de la Perière left the Naval Academy in 1906, in which he'd specialized and become a Lieutenant zur See. He would be assigned later that year as an officer aboard the battleship Kurfürst Friedrich Wilhelm. Still that year, Lothar risked his life to save a sailor who'd gone overboard. For that feat of bravery, he would receive his first of many decorations, the 4th-class Kronenorden. Subsequent to that, von Arnauld would participate in the trials of the battleships Schlesien and Schleswig-Holstein, after which he was assigned as watch officer, or WO, on V-155, a torpedo boat. Promoted to Oberleutnant zur See at the age of 24, he would take command of his first vessel, the V-160 torpedo boat. This was followed by 2 years from 1911 to 1913 in the German colony of Tsingtao in China, in which he was assigned as torpedo officer on board the light cruiser Emden. It is believed that these 2 years crisscrossing the China Sea on that cruiser that allowed von Arnauld to gain the kind of solid seafaring experience that would make him such a formidable U-boat commander a few years later. He returned to Germany in 1913, being assigned as both watch officer and torpedo officer on the battleship Scharnhorst. It was with the outbreak of the First World War in 1914 that allowed Lothar von Arnauld de la Perière to rise to his full potential as a naval officer. Von Arnauld would serve as an adjutant to Admiral Hugo von Pohl in Berlin at the outbreak of World War I. He would then transfer to the U-boat division in 1915, a move that would define the man and the officer. He undertook a U-boat officer's course in Pula, a port in southern Croatia, during which his talent became quickly evident to his superiors. He would take command of U-35 just a few months later in November 1915. Von Arnauld's performance as commander of U-35 was nothing short of staggering. He would undertake 13 patrols with his U-boat, all of them in the Mediterranean Sea, and all of them with one principal purpose: to destroy as many enemy merchant ships as possible. Those ships which carried fuel, food, machinery, munitions, and all other supplies needed for a war effort were critical targets for both sides of the war. That's why so many scores of merchant ships were sunk during the course of World War I. The result in terms of loss of human life was often tragic, even barbaric when it was innocent passengers who lost their lives on non-troop ships. Some of U-35s under von Arnauld were deadly in the extreme. His 5th patrol saw the sinking of 23 ships, totaling 68,000 tons, in just 5 weeks during April and May 1916. His 6th patrol during July and August of that year was even more astounding. In just 4 weeks, U-35 sank 54 ships, totaling 91,150 tons. It was reported that only one of his torpedoes missed a target during that unbelievable patrol. 54 ships sunk in 4 weeks in just one patrol. There were precious few U-boat commanders, including those in World War II, who attained that number of hits throughout their entire career, never mind in a single patrol. For that 6th patrol, von Arnauld was awarded the Pour le Mérite Award in 1916. However, he was very modest about what he achieved. He would later have this to say about that momentous patrol. "My record cruise was quite tame and dull. We stopped the vessels. The crews boarded the lifeboats. We inspected the ship's documents, told the crews how they could reach the next port, and then sank the stopped prize." Statistics surrounding Lothar von Arnauld de la Perière are so impressive that it's worth sharing some of them with you. There's good reason why he was by far the most successful submarine commander of all time. 195. That was the number of ships that von Arnauld was able to successfully sink, of which 191 were at the helm of U-35. The final 4 were at the command of U-139 during his final patrol of World War I. Furthermore, U-35 caused damage to a further 8 vessels, which means his submarines either sank or damaged 203 vessels. 120. That's the number of steamers that von Arnauld successfully sunk as part of the 195 vessels he sank. Add to that 63 sailing vessels, 4 passenger steamers, 2 armed merchant cruisers, 2 sloops, 2 trawlers, 1 auxiliary motor, and 1 Navy trawler. 455,871. That's the total number of gross raw tons, or GRT, of ships that he sank with his submarines. A further 34,312 tons of damaged ships can be added to that, for a total tally of 490,183 tons of ships that were either sunk or damaged by submarines commanded by him. 13. That was how many different countries whose vessels he sank or damaged. Those countries were Britain, France, Italy, Norway, Japan, Turkey, Greece, Denmark, Spain, Russia, Sweden, United States, and Portugal. 1001. That's the number of days that elapsed between his first and his last sinking of an enemy ship. Von Arnauld's first successful hit was on January 17, 1916, when U-35 sank Sutherland, a British steamer. His last successful hit as commander of a U-boat was on October 14, 1918, when U-139 sank the Portuguese Navy trawler, Augusto de Castillo. 4.9. That's the average number of days between each ship that von Arnauld's submarines sank or damaged between his first and last. However, that's actually a misleading statistic because his submarines would obviously not have been at sea for all those days. Most of the time, U-boats would be in dock for repairs, maintenance, or crew rest periods. Therefore, if one adds up all the days that either the U-35 or U-139 were physically at sea on patrol under von Arnauld's command, they total 315 days. That means that his success rate was actually a vessel being sunk or damaged every 1.5 days. Yes, every 1.5 days on average. That makes his hit rate a whole lot more impressive. Lothar von Arnauld de la Perière may be synonymous with the U-boats of the First World War, but he hardly sat on his laurels in the post-war years. Interestingly, he was actively involved in fighting Bolshevik insurrections in Germany immediately after the war. He then quickly returned to the newly formed Reichsmarine, or German Navy, in 1920. He took command almost immediately of the 11th Baltic Flotilla for a period of 2 years, and for which he was promoted to Korvettenkapitän in April 1922. Von Arnauld would take command of the training cruiser Emden when he was promoted once more in 1928, this time to the rank of Fregattenkapitän. He took great pride in being at the helm of the ship during its representational voyage around the world, which lasted for a year. By 1933, von Arnauld had decided to retire and took up a professorship at the Turkish Naval Academy. He was instrumental in organizing Turkey's first submarine squadron. He was based in Turkey until 1938 before returning to Germany. The Second World War should have been a new chapter in von Arnauld's illustrious career. It certainly started off that way, when he was recalled to active duty and made a vice admiral. He started off the war by serving as naval commandant in the official role of plenipotentiary delegate in what was then the German city of Danzig, today the Polish city of Gdansk. He was then ordered to serve as naval commandant for the Nazi-occupied Low Countries of Belgium and the Netherlands. He was then promoted to Rear Admiral, or more specifically, Admiral South. It was in that capacity that von Arnauld began to take part in secret negotiations with the Vichy government of occupied France. Not only was he a very well-respected military officer who was in command of the Mediterranean region, but he was also fluent in French. The von Arnauld de la Perière family had always been very proud of their French noble roots, and so French had remained spoken in the household. It was during these negotiations that he was killed in an aircraft crash on takeoff at Le Bourget Airport outside Paris on February 24, 1941. Von Arnauld was aged 54 when he died. His funeral was an impressive ceremony conducted at La Madeleine, one of the most significant cathedrals in Paris. His body was then transferred to Berlin to be interred at the Invalides Cemetery. His death was reported worldwide, such was his military stature. The New York Times proclaimed in its headline, "Nazi naval chief in France killed. Admiral Lothar von Arnauld de la Perière is reported victim of an accident World War U-boat hero, said to have sunk 200 ships. Received highest German military decoration." That headline by the New York Times proclaiming him to be Nazi was quite misleading. After all, historians believe that von Arnauld took very little interest in politics and was never known to be a devout Nazi, even though he had taken part in anti-Bolshevik campaigns. Ultimately, there is no doubt that Lothar von Arnauld de la Perière would have only wanted to be remembered as an able and successful submarine commander, and that he most certainly was. He died as the most successful submarine commander ever, an accolade that is all his to this very day.